Is rage applying a real thing? And if so, what can we do about it? In this video, we'll break it down. What rage applying means, what it really is, and 3 things that managers can do to try to prevent it on their teams. You may have seen the idea of rage applying on social media or news headlines. The visual is often an employee that gets so mad that they go ahead and go and mass apply for jobs angrily. But in real life, I generally see it as frustrated applying. When employees decide to look either internally for different roles within your company or externally, often there's things that have simmered over time, frustrations, something's not fitting with that employee. But often there is a moment that causes that employee to decide to make a more active search. And again, it tends to stem from frustration more than just rage or anger. And it really is a normal, practical thing for employees to do. So as an employer, how do you help to keep your best employees from rage applying or frustrated applying? 3 common things I see. One is a frustration in employees about clarity. That if as a manager, you're asking your employees to do something, it's incredibly important that you outline a few things. One is what the expectation looks like. What do you want that end product to be? So if you're asking an employee for something, is it a long memo? Is it a presentation? Is it just short talking points? So that the employee understands exactly what they're supposed to do. Then 2 is, have they been trained on it? Is it something new for the employee? And if they need to be trained, making sure that they have those steps. Oftentimes, the manager gives an assignment, doesn't give much clarity, the employee does it, and then ends up getting in trouble or getting frustrated by that manager because they didn't do it exactly how the manager aligned. So ensuring that when you're giving steps to an employee, you're walking through what the end product should look like, anything new that they need to know, who the audience is going to be, all of that information that can just take a couple minutes that makes not only their life easier, but yours as well, so that you're not redoing it. So that lack of clarity is the first thing I tend to see drive employees out the door. When they get in trouble or their manager gets irritated and the employee thinks, but you didn't give me clear instructions. The second kind of goes along with it. It's when an employee doesn't feel like they're being treated like a human. So if you're giving that assignment, like number 1, talking to the employee and recognizing they likely have a full plate. And often employees feel like there's a power dynamic. When they're given another assignment, they may just take it and add it to their plate and think in their mind, how am I going to get all of this done? So as a manager, talking to that employee and saying, hey, let's talk about how we can prioritize this with your existing workload. That can be a relief to employees who are thinking, how am I going to get this done as well? So again, recognizing that they're human and that they can't juggle all the balls in the air, at least not well. Other ways that employees often feel like they're not treated human are if they're taking paid time off and they're not able to recharge. They're expected to be just as on call as they were on their working days. Things like that, so that that paid time off feels more offish than onish. And so giving that employees the boundaries, talking to them about the expectations when they're off, and working hours as well. Often employees feel like they're expected to constantly be on their phones or checking in. So talking to the employee and being clear about what those expectations are. And remembering that no employee can keep all balls juggling in the air well. So employees need that time to recharge. And that type of investment in employees can often pay off, both in a short-term project, but also in their longevity. Oftentimes, employees will look at how they're treated and whether they're given that respect to have time off as they think about staying long-term at an organization. So in addition to a lack of clarity or lack of employees feeling like they're treated like a human, the third aspect that I see can get employees so frustrated that they look externally is systems in which they feel like they have no control over. Perfect example is right now a lot of organizations may be going through those formal performance reviews. And as a manager, you may be told if you have a team of 6 employees, there's a 5-point scale, you're allowed to give 1 2, 4 3s, and 1 4. These type of forced rankings. Now, as a manager, I get it. It can be really hard to think, well, this is what's given to me. What can I do? And in Thursday's Manager Method Minute email, we'll talk about talking points that you can try to push what you can internally to at least try to make that effort. But if you're a performer, an employee that's doing well, and you get a 2 ranking when you feel like you've been doing a 5-level or 4-level performance, it can be incredibly frustrating. And even more so if your manager says, I would have given you a 4, but we were told we could only give so many 2s, 3s, and 4s. Well, you may think, 1, what does my manager have influence over? And 2, what does this organization mean if I'm performing well, but I'm arbitrarily slotted into this? Especially if it affects aspects like compensation, or even things like the bonus, salary, even equity aspects like that. So those type of systems that employees are told, sorry, best I can drive your good employees to be looking out the door. So again, the three aspects that I see for managers are a lack of clarity. So what you can do is talking to employees and making sure that when you're explaining things, you're making it really clear. Ask them to repeat it back. Hey, do you have an understanding? What are you going to do on this? To make sure that that employee understands what's expected of them and what that end product will look like. 2 is feeling treated like they're human. Again, remember, your employees have a lot of emotions below the surface, and all of the information that you can provide, especially clarity around expectations, grace and space, as I say. These are aspects that you can control often as a manager that make a huge difference to your employees. And 3, systems that are outside of your control. That can be really hard for employees. And as a manager, again, it can be challenging as well. Probably the hardest for you to influence. But what you can do to advocate for your employees and trying to have that voice to explain things to employees without passing it off on a system. So if you're trying to keep your good employees in seat and keep them from going out the door, remember that it's those moments. And so thinking in your mind, what would frustrate me as an employee? What frustrates me as a manager? And what can you control? So keep following. Make sure you're getting our Manager Method Minute emails on Thursdays as well. We're glad to have you here.